Middleton Hall has been the home of many residents throughout its centuries of history. There have been tales of happy marriages and true love, but there have also been stories of unbelievable drama and crimes of passion. Join us as we uncover one of the most explosive romances experienced right here at Middleton Hall. Before we begin, let's take a look at the values of the past when it came to love and marriage. Our stories are focused on the Willoughby residents of the Hall, beginning in the 1500s. Unlike modern times, marriage throughout this period of history was more of a business operation than a love match. For those in the upper and middle ranks of society, marriages were based on land, money, and status. Indeed, historians claim that marriage was the main means of transferring property, money, and women across generations and kin groups. It became a social convention or a duty to marry, and to ensure your marriage was to an acceptable match. For wealthier families in particular, marriage was a prime weapon of the social war. It could transform the prospects of entire families. This was very true in some of the marriages at Middleton Hall. From this information, marriage looked a bit of a dreary business. Was there any place for love, or was marriage simply a pragmatic venture? To tell you the truth, marriage for wealth was not exclusive. There could be both love and business in marriage. In fact, as the centuries progressed, it was increasingly common practice for couples to declare their mutual acceptance during courtship. Was this the case for Francis Willoughby, whom our tale centres around? But how happy and mutual were his marriages at Middleton Hall? Let us begin our tale in the 1500s with the orphaned Willoughby children, Thomas, Margaret and Francis. Their father, Henry Willoughby, was killed in the Ketts Rebellion in 1549, and their mother, Anne, had predeceased Henry by a year. It seems these children had already begun life in a loveless fashion. Unfortunately for Thomas, a life filled with love and happy marriage never came to fruition. As a boy, his wardship with his uncle Henry Grey, the Marquis of Dorset, came to an abrupt end when Henry was executed for his attempt to thwart the accession of Mary Tudor to the throne by elevating his daughter, Lady Jane Grey, to the throne. Thomas's wardship was passed on to William Lord Paget, a Catholic peer, who arranged the marriage between Thomas and his own daughter in a move that was suggested as securing Lord Paget's access to the full Willoughby inheritance. Still only a child, Thomas was locked in a marriage arranged by a man who intended to steal his inheritance. He wasn't given the chance to court a woman for himself or even fall in love. But Thomas's misfortune didn't end there. At only 18 years of age, Thomas caught a sickness and suddenly died. Having produced no children, the estate was passed to his brother Francis. Would Francis Willoughby, now heir to the Willoughby estates at just 13 years old, have more luck in love? Following the death of his older brother, Francis's wardship became valuable, and in 1560 it was bought by a man named Francis Knollys. Knollys attempted to have Francis marry his daughter, but Francis, who was wary of ambitious men and how his inheritance was often regarded as a prize, refused the match. On the 20th of November 1564, the marriage treaty between Francis and Elizabeth Littleton was drawn up. Elizabeth was the daughter of John Littleton of Frankley, Warwickshire, and lived in a neighbouring estate. Francis described her in a letter as a young gentlewoman who had received a good education and was descended from a noble house, was well connected, and lived near his country home of Middleton Hall. Were they in love? Possibly. They definitely had a shared love of music, and so maybe a young whirlwind kind of love seemed more likely. After all, Francis was barely 18 at the time of his marriage, and Elizabeth was younger than that. From the get-go, problems rose with their marriage. Francis's sister, Margaret, was outspoken in her opposition to the match. In the Middleton papers, there were quite a large number of angry letters from Margaret to her brother over this issue. Francis never told Margaret that he was engaged. She believed he had been tricked by a man that could not be trusted and by a woman who could not keep her temper. Her objections were not unfounded. In fact, they were intensified when John Littleton failed to pay the £2,000 dowry which he had originally agreed to pay Francis. It also seems that Margaret did not warm to Elizabeth's personality. She wrote to her brother in 1564 that she hoped his marriage would not turn out to be a case of marry in haste and repent at leisure. Even once Francis had married Elizabeth, Margaret refused to be in the same place as her. Nevertheless, the first few years of marriage appeared to have been amicable between Francis and Elizabeth, and their financial situation enabled them to live in sumptuous style of banquets and leisure. This would all change, however, when Francis would turn 21 and become of age to run his estate. Unfortunately, their marriage began to falter. A great problem for the marriage was Elizabeth's character. She wanted high society and to be at court. She wanted to gamble and win money with friends. She wanted fine things and parties, but most of all, she wanted power. Elizabeth was often described as a woman of wit and virtue, but of a turbulent spirit, with an ungovernable passion, who enjoyed provoking Francis by saying vexatious things. Her temperament was volatile, ranging from loving and happiness to rage and suicidal. The pressure of not having produced a son also played on Elizabeth's mind. They had 12 children, of which only 6 girls reached maturity, and Elizabeth often blamed Francis for the deaths of their own children. Elizabeth's father even got involved at one point to try and save their marriage. John Littleton wrote many letters to Francis to calm his marriage with Elizabeth and to suggest that all of the chaos and misery was caused by the fabrications of others trying to break them up. However, Francis wrote a very long letter to John to give an account of his wife's manner. He wrote that he had long bore his wife's behaviour in secret sorrow, but now she was behaving the same way in public. In order to appease Elizabeth's temper, he had forbidden his only sister, Margaret, to come to his home for 8 years. Francis's breaking point came in 1578. He took the family to Coventry and made a set of extraordinary rules for the household for while he was in London. Elizabeth was to be confined to her own rooms and was not allowed to see her children, who were then in the care of their nurse, Joan. And the rules didn't end there. She had to follow the orders of 2 household captains, she was banned from the household stores and from buying anything for herself, and had no authority to command anything in the house except necessary diet for herself. It didn't help the situation that Margaret was making the couple's arguments public knowledge, and the household servants were also interfering and taking sides. Elizabeth was trapped. I am sure you are thinking, how could they still be married when things had become so extreme? And you would be right. The couple separated in 1579, and in 1582, Queen Elizabeth herself ordered Francis to pay his estranged wife £200 per year for Elizabeth's separate maintenance. Cassandra, Francis's great-granddaughter, described their relationship by saying, "It appears that Sir Francis and his lady lived very unhappily together." And that's rather a large understatement, if you ask me. But were things always stormy between the two? Despite separating, they reconciled in 1588 after Elizabeth became unhappy with the state of her marriage and often wrote to Francis asking him to take her back, despite all of their previous marital disharmony. Their stormy relationship was not forgotten, but they did become more amicable and at a stretch were even friends. Over the following years, Elizabeth calmed. She remained estranged from her daughters, who refused to meet her, but she often visited Francis at his house and wrote to her son-in-laws. Despite her calmer temperament and willingness to make her relationship work, Elizabeth died in London in 1594. Her story may have ended there, but Sir Francis decided to remarry. A wealthy widow, Dorothy Tamworth, was recommended, and they were soon married. Unbelievably, however, it appears his second marriage could be described as even worse than his first. It is believed that Dorothy encouraged friction between Sir Francis and his son-in-law, Percival, and attempted to turn Percival and Francis's daughter, Bridget, out of Middleton. Sir Francis died after a short and violent illness on the 16th of November, 1596, in London. There were suspicions that Dorothy had murdered her husband with poison. However, she was never formally accused. Dorothy was 3 months pregnant at the time, and if the child had been a boy, it would have inherited Middleton Hall. But she gave birth to a girl, who died in infancy anyway, and thus Francis's eldest daughter, Bridget, and her husband Percival inherited the estate. After these two fiery and scandalous marriages, Middleton Hall's stories of love seem to be tainted with disaster and sadness. But this wasn't always the case, as it seems Francis Willoughby's descendants and future residents of the Hall were able to avoid disastrous romances and even find love in their marriages. Could such tales of misery and woe for Francis Willoughby ever blossom into stories of happiness and affection for his descendants? You can read all about the love match between Bridget and Percival in our blog post for this month. But to get all the detail, you'll have to wait and find out over the next few months as we uncover more and more secrets about Middleton Hall's hidden history. Francis's love stories may have become a thing of the past, but Middleton Hall still experiences stories of love in the present day. Now more than just a heritage site to explore past loves, Middleton has become a beautiful wedding venue and a site to celebrate continuous love as many people begin their journeys together here. And so, I think I can speak for all of us when I say that the unfortunate love and marriage experienced by Francis Willoughby and his elder brother Thomas are now distant memories and have been overshadowed by the new love found in the present day here at Middleton Hall.